All right. What's up, guys? I'm trying to adjust the light right here to make it look not crazy. What's going on? Today has been one of those days where I really struggled to hit the go live button. It was, I've been trying for about an hour, and for the longest time, it was just because I was scared to push it. And then now it's, it's more of the fear of, do I have the whole story lined up yet? Like, is it going to make sense? It's like, because I can outline it given just a little bit of time and roll with it. And you can tell a story in 30 seconds, or you can tell it in 6 hours or more, or years, really. So it's like just filling in the details without going overboard. But there's a little bit of a backstory behind the podcast this time. There's a very real reason that my podcast is going to be what it is today, and it's because I broke some of my own rules, but for a good reason. And it's just what it is. Something like, I'm always trying to bend the rules and see. It's just, I'm a being of constant improvement. It's just the way it works. And in doing so, last night we had something come up in the business. Gigantic opportunity, really. And through this whole process is like, it just it the direction we were heading got paused for a second, and then this came to the forefront, and it was for sure a risk worth taking. But as a result of that, got sent into a scramble, got kind of caught off guard, like got punched in the jaw and rocked for a second, so to speak. And we had to hustle and regain our composure and press them up against the cage and do what we needed to do and grind it out to recover. So that's exactly what it is. So I don't like to look at screens after the sun goes down. I've in learning how to not only game smarter, but just smarter screen use. It's like, how do I do this in the healthiest way possible, as I've talked about for such a long time. But it's for this reason, because even with the blue blocker glasses on, staying up after the sun went, and working on the computer intensely for a few hours, trying to scramble and get this work done, physically, I just feel like absolute garbage uh, after going on that cleanse. And I can just tell you, you can take my word for it or not. But if you're my person, I know you're always trying to gain that little bit of an edge. The performance factor, how well you perform, it's so critical, because I'm sluggish today. My head hurts. My bones hurt abnormally for no reason. So it's like, the amount of stress that artificial blue light puts on your adrenal system is very taxing, so it is what it is. But as I've stated and mentioned many times, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't show up to the show. And I almost couldn't show up to the show today after having just talked about it. It is so easy to do. But that really caused me to take a hard look inward and say to myself, is like, are you really going about this the smartest way? Are you really focusing on the right things right now? Or have you gone off of course a little bit? It's always, it's not always a good question to ask, but every once in a while, if you don't stop and slow down and look inward for a second and say, where am I? It's like you don't know. So I got to thinking about, this was like a very mild thing, but I catch it now and I'm like, okay, I got to learn how to do some of this better because, growth creates complexity, as I've talked about before. And then you have to come in and hash it out and send it through the ringer and nail out the systems and processes. And that was what was going on. And that workshopping time is so valuable for a number of reasons. And that's what I'm going to talk about in my podcast today. So without further ado, that is the backstory to the reason this podcast exists. And here we go. 3, 2, 1, and what's up, gearheads? Today we're talking about how to really dig in and find your purpose, but stop procrastinating all the same, because it's something that I know that I do personally, and it's something that I'm always looking to eliminate, but a lot of times you have to be aware of it, and it often creeps up for the best reasons. And, I just due to the nature of who I know I am, trying to always find and be on the cutting edge, talking yesterday about sharpening the axe, how important that is. But today's more about making sure you show up to the job with the right tools in hand and, understanding the consequences of not. So, just whenever I got on this journey of creating $1 million streaming business, I had gone through, every Russell Brunson training I could go through, and as well as his other coaches. And whenever I invested in this 2 Comma Clubettes coaching group, like, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know how to do everything. I was so interested in everything, and in the way it worked, and the little intricacies of, and the little knobs and the twists and turns. And I got on that journey, and I was doing that too because I was trying to find my purpose. What was I actually meant for? Because, I remember my thoughts as I was creating my Twitch channel was, it's like, I'm going to get on here and talk it out until I figure it out. It's like, one day I'll figure out what I want to be whenever I grow up. But then I started seeing the conventional way of doing things, and I was like, I've got to find a better way because this way sucks. And, people, streamers, are thinking about it from that subscriber mindset. When you're actually making money, they're like, I need more subscribers. And, if you look beyond the goal of that, it's like, if you just thought about that sort of money coming from Twitch is like your tip jar, and had your business sitting over here on a list, it would be that you owned and had access to, it would be a much better thing. It's just a simple frame of reference shift, really. But I started geeking out on all this marketing stuff. And I've talked at length before about going back into the streaming communities and techno babbling my brains out and being like, okay, Marty, slow down a second. Go back to whenever you were just a normal gamer and or MMA fighter or whatever it was, because I was still so unclear at the time. And that was it. I hadn't found my purpose. And what ended up happening, and what ultimately doomed me in this situation, was it was kind of like having a recruit loadout. It's like, it's a jack of all trades, master of none. In Rainbow Six Siege, the recruit, like the generic character within the game, does not have a unique ability or gadget, and he can't even like properly load out his guns, although he has access to all the guns and all all the secondary utilities, both on attack and defense. Like he's a jack of all trades, and he's not really, good for anything except clowning on the other team, essentially. And I realized I put myself into that place, and as a result, I started procrastinating because I was asking myself the wrong question. I was like, how do I do this? How do I get this all done? And it took me back to that point as a streamer where I was like, okay, obviously I have to get new people into my channel. It's like, how do I do that? And how do I do it in a way that's going to work for me, AKA kind of fast, because I'm a little bit impatient at times, I will admit. But whenever I flip the question, that actually changes. And that Sadie Bug saying hello. If you can hear that, I do apologize, but we continue nonetheless. And then it really dawned on me as I was watching training in the Two Comma Clubets coaching group that Russell Brunson did, where he talked about finding your who and not the how. And he said that a lot of people start asking the how do I do something? And you get off in the weeds, and then you're lost, you get lost, and then you start procrastinating, and then procrastinating breaks momentum, and it's a downward spiral from there. And I was there, and it got me to thinking whenever I was at the bottom of this, and I had gone, just all in on this process and was grinding my gears, pun intended, so hard. And all of a sudden this presentation dropped on me like a divine blessing. It was like, oh man, I was like, that is what I needed to hear. It's like, cause I start to think like marketing was a game I was loving, I was geeking out about, but I was like, got to have other people to play the game with. It's like, this isn't fun by yourself. This isn't fun sitting and building funnels all day and never launching them, or telling anybody what the hell you're doing. It's like the same thing as, just playing terrorist hunt all the time. Like, yeah, you are sharpening the axe there, but are you actually playing the game? And so I started thinking about all these other trainings, and I thought back to Myron Golden's presentation from Funnel Hacking Live, where he was talking about, the people with the voice are like the next highest tier of, you got the implementers who are actually twisting and torquing the knobs, and they're the lowest. Unfortunately, that sweat equity, like, it's needed at first, but after that, it's moving on up the value ladder of what you can provide. And then there's, if I'm not mistaken, he talked about managers, and then he talked about people being the voice, which in my opinion, that's that was the hardest part for me personally, was becoming the voice or being the character. And it's like, if you're streaming, or a streamer and can help them figure this out, it's like, that's where it is, because they're already, in my opinion, doing the hard part. Because the imagination, the people on the highest tier were the imaginary, the visionaries, the people with imagination. And I was like, well, there's no problem with me there. It's like the problem a lot of times is I can't shut it off. It's like I can't get stuff out faster than I get ideas, and that can be a terrible thing unless you know how to put the systems and processes in place. And in that presentation, he talked about, as being the visionary, somebody with the vision, your time is best spent. And, take this for what it's worth. This is, he did $3 million at Grant Cardone's event live in 90 minutes. And at Funnel Hacking Live, it was 13 maybe. The point is, this guy is saying you should figure out how to tell awesome stories and create irresistible offers. That's where your time is best spent. So that's what I started doing. So I started thinking about epic stories and how I could craft them. But it's like, not only figuring out the right stories, the ones that really mattered and that had the actual emotional juice behind them, breaking and rebuilding my own false beliefs, and then creating irresistible offers and learning that, and, geeking out on Stephen Larson stuff, learning the Xavier model, which, I could, I'm just a big fan of, because that was like a big for me, was learning that process on how to create an irresistible offer that's strong every time, and then, it was a matter of attracting the team after I realized through that process of doing that. And I had to do it all myself at first. I was still a jack of all trades, but through this process, I began to realize, like, hey, man, you got to find a team, but before you even find a team, rather, you have to become like a full-fledged operator. It's time for you to drop that recruit status and specialize in something. And through this process of telling stories and creating offers and stuff, and actually teaching through a few things a few times, I was like, I like that, but and then I was like, I love talking about that. It's like, does my person want to hear that? It's like, it was through that process. And then once I became a full-fledged operator with this, unique thing that's hodgepodge together of not only gaming smarter, but making it rain harder, so to speak. It's like now all of a sudden the team is forming little by little. And the thing that really kind of creeps up on that is like the fear of like what comes next. It's like now a team's forming. It's like, oh, it's like, how do we work together? How do we do this? And like, thank goodness for Alex Sharfin's training and the stuff he's learned and that. But through this whole process, I've been reading this book I've talked about a few times, The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. This morning I was reading it, and it was talking about the value of workshopping and getting together. And last night was a ringer of a night as far as screen time after the sun goes down. But that workshopping time, it was the beginning of us forming these systems and processes and getting it down. And it's like, we no longer have to do that anymore. That was time well spent. That was results driven, or results oriented, purpose driven. I was trying to think of how Tony Robbins would say that, because it's definitely from him. And that RPM time management method is another thing I'm dearly in love with. But at the end of the day, there's never a shortage of people that could and probably want to help you if you would just look and be receptive to it. Because, man, I got to tell you, like, through this process of laying down my own systems and processes as I go, and leaving the breadcrumbs behind whenever I realize it's something that it's not my time best spent on, like, it's there, it's documented. And that ability to broadcast is an amplifier and attract exactly who you not only need but want. And I got to tell you, there are challenges that arise, and nailing the systems and processes down is vital to success. But then in the end, you got to be able to let go of the outcome after a certain point. You got to let go of the reins and be able to focus on where you make the most impact, where you make the biggest difference, and where your time is the best spent. So remember, guys, you're just one upgrade away. Sweet. Another day, another one down. That was, I kind of rambled maybe on that one. That one went long, but so I'm going to probably take my own advice here. I'm going to take some time off of the screen. I got to make up for putting that extra time in last night past the bell. But it was well worth it, regardless of outcome here. Like we could win or we could win on this either way. Like we have set up systems and processes so that we never have to go through that again, at least not to that degree. There'll be some refinements, I'm sure, that happen over time. That's where the workshopping comes in that I just talked about. But it'll be, you know, it's one of those things like you go through it and you're like, okay, next time we got to put a rein on that, because like that was very time intensive, and that was a lot of time spent where I'm not the best necessary for the situation. But now that we got that part of the systems and processes done, it's like, you know, now we're on to the next refinement. Where else is the machine going wrong? Like that's the adventure. That's the fun part. So, man, we're looking for some streamers really, really soon to help out. You know, in fact, I've been doing some trainings in my Facebook group. I'm going to leave that link in the description below. Please hop in that Facebook group right now. Because it's not going to be open to the public for much longer. Trust me. So remember, get on it. You're one upgrade away.